Hello, let's talk about skepticism. Skeptics, when we're talking about philosophy, skeptics don't just doubt this thing or that thing. When we're talking about skeptics, we're not talking about people who don't believe in God or don't believe the earth is round, or we're talking about people who think knowledge is impossible, who think that the human mind is not up to the task of discovering truth. Let's look at three skeptical arguments. The first one is the Meno Paradox. A little background here. This argument comes from Plato, and it's really useful to know that Plato already doesn't think that we can learn through the senses. This argument is not an argument so much that we can't gather knowledge through the senses. That's in the background. Now, if you want some very straightforward, easy to comprehend arguments that we shouldn't trust what the senses tell us, that's what we'll find in Descartes' first meditation. Descartes is not really a skeptic. He's using these skeptical arguments in order to discover what can be known in spite of them, how we can acquire knowledge even though the skeptical arguments are so strong. Now, for Plato, it's a little different. Plato thinks that knowledge, to really know something, the object of knowledge needs to be permanent. Physical things, the things that we perceive through the senses, the sensible world, is a world of constant change. So, when I say something about the pen, like, the pen's cap is off, technically for Plato, there is no such thing as the pen, because the pen is a physical thing made up of stuff, and the stuff here in front of me is constantly changing, actually. It is constantly changing. Is the dirt part of it? Is the pieces that break off, do they really? A big question. But Plato is following from Heraclitus, who famously says something along the lines of, you can't step in the same river twice. So for Plato, regarding physical things, we're kind of going to have to choose whether we say that, a truth about a physical thing is a truth that lasts a moment and then is gone, or that there are no truths about physical things. And Plato is going to say the latter, that we don't really get truth about physical things. We don't really gather truth about the natures of things through the senses. The senses give us merely practical information. It's a way of thinking about it. His word is opinion. Merely practical information, not knowledge. So what kinds of things can we get knowledge about? It's the things that never change. Right? Whether the pen is in, two pieces or not, that changes. The physical world is full of change, but that one piece and one piece makes two pieces, that doesn't change. The nature of the triangle doesn't change. What's true about a circle is true forever. What about justice? What about beauty? When I see the beautiful sunset, sure, the sky is not always that beautiful, but beauty is always itself. For Plato, at least. I mean, for us, maybe it's in the eye of the beholder, but okay. So that's the kind of stuff we're wanting to know about. In the Meno, the context is Plato and Meno are discussing the nature of virtue. Meno wants to know if virtue can be taught. Socrates says, well, I don't know what virtue is. Meno gives some suggestions. Socrates says, he pokes a hole in Meno's idea real easy. And then Meno's like, well, there's no hope of knowing anything. All right, so here's how the argument goes. Skeptical argument number one, the Meno Paradox. Meno says that, more or less, if we can learn anything at all, then we must be able to learn either the things we know or the things we don't know. Okay, so there's the start of it. If we can learn anything at all, if learning is possible, it must be, and we get a little analysis of the knowable. We're going to have a lot of analyses of the knowable. in philosophy. Generally, I mean, it's like there's two kinds of people in the world, right? Not all of those sentences are true, but there's a large number of them are true. So we'll see lots of analyses of the noble. So if we can learn anything at all, it must be that we can learn either the things that we know or the things that we don't know. It's exhaustive. We've got a good analysis here. Okay, now, next step. Meno is going to say, but we can't learn the things that we know, and we can't learn the things that we don't know. We've got an exhaustive list. If we can't learn the things that we know, and we can't learn the things that we don't know, then yeah, feels like can't learn anything at all. All right, so step one. Well, why am I giving all these steps? Can we learn the things that we know? You probably already got this one. Obviously not, right? Learning is coming to know things. If you already know it, you can't come to know it. You can't learn the things that you know. That part's easy. You can't learn the things that you don't know. Why not? Okay, here's the thing. Knowing something, learning something, it doesn't happen just when a truth wanders into your head, right? I mean, in one ear, out the other, whatever. It's not enough that you have a true idea. You've got to be in a position to recognize the truth as true. If we want to know what virtue is, and you don't already know what virtue is, then what happens when someone gives you the true definition of virtue? You don't recognize it as the thing that you're looking for. So you can't learn the things that you know just because you know them, and you can't learn the things that you don't know just because you don't know them. Not knowing them, you're not a competent judge to recognize the truth, even if you stumble upon it. All right, so there's our first skeptical argument, the Meno Paradox. The problem of the Criterion. You'll see, it's a lot like the Meno Paradox, but it's a little bit more concerning. More concerning. Is there a way around this argument? This is hard to imagine. It definitely means something about the nature of knowledge. All right, let's get into it. The problem of the Criterion. If we can know anything at all, it must surely be on account of some criterion or other. Some criterion by which we can recognize the true. We can distinguish, we can pick out, let's say pick out the true from among things that may or may not be true. Okay, criterion, think like a ruler, right? A ruler gives you something to go by. You've got, let's say a foot long, you got 12 inches here. You can use it to pick out things that are an inch and things that aren't an inch. We need something like that for truth. Something by which we can recognize things that are true. Now, the version of this argument that I know best comes from Pierre Bayle in the 17th century. And Pierre Bayle is writing in the context of Descartes and suggests self-evidence as one such criterion. What could be stronger than that, right? Self-evident propositions, self-evident truths are those that kind of carry their truth with them. The triangles have three sides. You don't need any evidence for it. If you understand what triangle, have, side, if you understand the words, you get the evidence, right? Self-evident things are true. Now, of course, this criterion, using self-evidence as a criterion doesn't mean that it will be able to pick out every truth. But if it picks out truth reliably, we can use it to know. Problem. But for any criterion we could choose, we must ask, how do I know it reliably picks out the truth. How do I know? How do I know? Well, how do we answer a question like that? We need some criterion. Okay, so we need a criterion to justify our criterion. If we can know anything at all, it must be on account of some criterion. But how do we know we have a criterion that's reliable here? Two options, just two. We could apply the criterion to itself. Self-evidence, for instance. How do I know that self-evidence reliably picks out the true? Well, is it self-evident that all self-evident propositions are true? Let's suppose it is. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, maybe what self-evidence... let's suppose that it's true, that it's self-evident, that self-evident propositions are true. Circular reasoning, not reliable, right? Okay. And then, of course, if it's not true, we're not going to be justifying the criterion that way either. Okay, so if we're not going to use the criterion itself to justify itself, because that's so obviously circular, we'll need some other criterion to justify using self-evidence as the criterion. But the question will repeat itself. If, I have some sort of evidence that self-evidence is true, well, what about that evidence? How do I know that's good evidence, right? And in that case, we're destined for an explanatory regress. So ultimately, our knowledge will be built on nothing. Okay, so we got the Meno Paradox, we've got the problem of the criterion. Third, the pessimistic induction. Now, the pessimistic induction is something of a skeptical argument, a kind of local skeptical argument regarding scientific theories. I mean, we could expand it a little bit to theories in general, but scientific theories, right? We have the story of the history of science, that the history of science is a history of failure in a sense, right? We've got a theory, we prove that theory true. No. We have a theory, we get some evidence for that theory, we try to prove that theory true, and what happens is eventually we prove that theory false, and we replace it by a better theory. So if, looking at the history of these theories, we find, a general lifespan of a scientific theory of, so many generations, maybe, until it's replaced by a better theory, it's discovered not to be true, but that there's some other theory that's true. Basically, the pessimistic induction just says, hey, we should look at our theories historically. And if what we're seeing is all these historical theories are eventually replaced and found to be false, well, what do you think is going to happen with the theories that we hold now, right? Today's theories is just like yesterday's theories. So, if humanity is able to survive another couple millennia, of course, we'll see systematically all the theories that we have, replaced. Okay, now, does this mean that, science doesn't make progress? I don't think that's what it means, but I think what it means is that we should understand scientific progress separately from, the scientific progress can't be measured in the truth of our theories, especially if you consider truth as some kind of very straightforward binary. Everything's either true or false, right? Our scientific theories technically aren't true. Even the today ones technically aren't true. We'll find, this is the induction, right? We'll find that eventually it's disproved. Does that mean that there's no progress in science? I think it means that scientific progress has to be measured differently than in truth. Or maybe better, we shouldn't think of our theories, our models of reality, as true in some very straightforward sense. Maybe we could see them as true as as offering a more and more detailed model of the thing that they're trying to understand, but not as like, 1 plus 1 equals 2 is true and 1 plus 1 equals 3 is false. Our theories, our very complicated theories, aren't going to be true and false in that simplistic sense. Our scientific progress can't really be measured in the amount of truths that we discover. All right. Does that mean that there's no knowledge? I mean, maybe it doesn't really mean that. Again, maybe none of these arguments are really telling us that, like, humanity doesn't know anything at all. Maybe they're telling us that there's a couple different senses of the term knowledge, and we should really think about what we mean when we claim knowledge. Knowledge, I mean, the thesis that I want to hold and share here is that knowledge is the result of labor. If you want to know what some particular kind of knowledge is, you've got to analyze the labor, right? I don't know. Another funny thing that fits in here rather nicely, Socrates says in the Phaedo that he considers philosophy to be the greatest of art, right? What we're doing when we're theorizing, when we're trying to understand reality, it's art. We're modeling reality and trying to make it digestible to others. Does that get us truth in some very literal kind of mathematical sense? I think that the truth in the mathematical sense may be the least important variety of truth. Seems like a mysterious thing to say, but I'm just going to leave it there. All right.